What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got a reaction to acdc and their album High Voltage, brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Carl. Thank you, Carl. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out that Patreon link below, the Patreon link on the end screen. We could not do it without them. We're about to celebrate our 5th anniversary, and none of that would be possible without the patrons. We're running you can get a week for free. Go check out that Patreon link. See if you like it in there. Now, before we get into this, we are going to run all of the Bon Scott-led acdc albums. Now, Trey and I have already done Highway to Hell, and that's the last one. But I'm thinking about doing something I've never done on this channel and do a revisit of it. And I'm probably going to do that because we did it 4.5 years ago. And I'm interested as I go through from the start to see what I think of that album. So that's probably how we'll end this one. But that is up if you want to go look at it now. But things have changed in the last 4.5 years. I've listened to a ton of music, and perspectives also changed. I mean, I liked it, but I'm just saying. And I don't know a lot about acdc. I spent a ton of time researching this because it's the first album, but don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with all of it. I got it nice and condensed, but I spent some hours, literally. My tie to acdc, they came out with an album called Who Made Who in 1986 here in the United States where I'm at. And man, I had that cassette on repeat in the old Alpine stereo in my in my car, dating myself seriously here, but wow, I really resonate with that. But otherwise, I've never really listened to a lot of acdc. I like them, no reason why, just, one of those things. So let's dive into some research here. This is the first internationally released album. It contains tracks completed from their first 2 previous Australia-only issued albums, High Voltage and TNT. Originally released internationally on May 14, 1976 in the UK on Atlantic Records, in the US on Atco Records. It's a commercial success, selling 3 million units in the US alone. But this is how album sales work. It only went to 146 in the United States, but it sold 3 million albums, which is insane, man. It was the height of album popularity. However, the album was initially panned by some critics upon its release, including a review by Rolling Stones magazine's Billy Altman that called it, quote, an all-time low for the hard rock genre. Billy wasn't looking too good years later on that take, was he? In December 1975, Atlantic Records UK head Phil Carson signed acdc to a worldwide deal. The group's first 2 albums, as I talked about, High Voltage and the harder driving TNT, had been hits in their native Australia. The single is A Long Way to the Top, If You Want to Rock and Roll, peaked at number 5 in Australia, and that is the first track on this album. And now plans were made for the band to tour England in 1976. The group had already recorded their next single, Jailbreak, and had already begun recording their 3rd LP, Dirty Deeds, done dirt cheap, when in April 1976, they flew out on their first British tour. The international release only included 2 tracks from the Australian High Voltage. It's She's Got Balls and Little Lover, with the rest of the songs taken from TNT. The band arrived in the UK in the midst of the fledgling punk movement, spearheaded by bands like the Sex Pistols and the Damned. acdc was never really part of the movement, but got misidentified as such by some observers. And Angus Young recalled this to Guitar World in 1993. He said, quote, at that time, we were giving punk music a good name because that was the word they used to describe us, a punk band. They'd get the wrong idea. We weren't punk, but they'd put us on the same bill as punk bands. And they sure got a shock when they started spitting at us, and we spat back. We were never ones for getting slumped under a tag or filed under A, B, or C. We started as a rock and roll band. That's what we play, what we do best. We never claimed to do anything else. And all the way up in 2010, Malcolm Young concurred, telling Mojo magazine, punk rock was just a fashion. It didn't change the music, it changed the fashion. That's basically all it is. In a 1977 interview with ABC's Countdown, Bon Scott insisted, quote, we're pulling bigger crowds than they are. I mean, we've got our following here. It's not new wave, it's not punk. It's just people who like our band. We honestly thought the punk and the new wave thing might spoil it a bit for us if it hasn't at all. But it was a big fad, just like anything else, a big fad for a while. The main thing about it is gave rock music a real kick in the gut. Now, the production team of George Young, the older brother of Malcolm and Angus, and Harry Vanda, was crucial in the development of their sound. Vanda was a bandmate of Young's and the Easy Beats, and the pair were the main songwriters of the Easy Beats' later hits, including their international hit, Friday on My Mind. In the 1994 book, Highway to Hell, The Life and Times of acdc legend Bon Scott, Chris Gilby, who was the promotion man at Albert Productions at the time, recalls to author Clinton Walker, quote, the great thing George and Harry taught me as a producer was if you've got a good rhythm track, you've got the beginnings of a record. If you don't, you've got nothing. In the same memoir, Michael Browning confirms George and Harry's most important criterion was rhythm. The whole thing has to just feel right. If you listen to those records today, they feel good. All right, all tracks are written by Angus, Malcolm, and Bon Scott, except for one, and they just had somebody help them out on that one. The music will not be in the video, guys, but it's going to be at a Vimeo link, so click on that if you want to follow along with me. Let's jump into it. And I already mentioned this was the first song on here. It's A Long Way to the Top, in parentheses, if you want to rock and roll. The song combines bagpipes, that's right, bagpipes, with hard rock instrumentation. In the middle section of the song, there's a call and response between the bagpipes and the guitars, and I'll explain that to you, how complicated that was here in a second. This was a signature song for Bon Scott. Brian Johnson, who of course replaced Bon after his tragic death, does not play this song live, or has not. Maybe he has, and maybe you know better, but all the research I read has not done it out of respect for Bon. In January 2018, as part of Triple M's Ozfest 100, the most Australian songs of all time, this song was ranked number 5. The title and chorus line said to originate with a Melbourne club manager who would warn the young bands he booked that it would be, quote, a long, bloody way to the top if they wanted to make it in the business. While jamming on new songs in the studio, co-producer George Young, as I said, the older brother of Angus and Malcolm, recalled that Bon Scott had once been in a pipe band and encouraged the band to experiment with incorporating bagpipes into the song. Bon left the studio, went and bought some bagpipes, which he purchased for an insanely amount of money, and simply putting this pipe set together proved tricky, and it became apparent Bon had never played the instrument before. He was the drummer for that pipe band, but he didn't tell them that. Nonetheless, he taught himself to play well enough to record and perform the song, initially with the help of tape loops. However, playing the song was made difficult by the fact the whole band would have to tune to the drone pipe. Thus, the song, though iconic of the band's early repertoire, was played live no more than 30 times because I was reading, like they say with the bagpipes, it takes a while for them to get going. So here's everybody waiting, right? And like the instrument has to warm up. So no one knows really to come in on the guitar and stuff. So it's a complicated thing. I don't think I know this song, but I mean, it's obviously very famous, so maybe I do. But I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Carl. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. It's a fantastic song, man. And the interesting, like, interplay between the bagpipes and obviously, as always, the fantastic guitar work. Like, I've never heard this song, but I felt like I had, right? Because it just sounds like AC/DC in a very, very good way. Well written, too. Basically telling you, you think this is all fun and games. Like, this is really difficult, man. Like, you see the finished product when I'm up here singing and everybody's cheering, but, you know, he says, getting robbed, getting stoned, getting beat up, broken bone, getting had, getting took. I'll tell you, folks, it's a lot harder than it looks. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Think it's easy doing one-night stands. Try playing in a rock and roll band. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. So I thought it was actually really well written, too, telling you, like, it's not really what it appears, right? This is a lot of hard work, and this is tough stuff. Next up, we have the second track, Rock and Roll Singer. All right, Rock and Roll Singer. It goes without saying the guitar work's great, the drum is great, Bon's vocals are fantastic. It's a pretty cleverly written song, right? His parents wanted him to be a doctor or a warrior man, but he drops out of school because he was going to be a rock and roll singer. He tells us how successful he's going to be. And he gets in here on the bridge where you can stick your 9-to-5 living in your collar and your tie. You can stick your moral standards because it's a dirty lie. You can stick your golden handshake and you can stick your silly rules and all the other blank that you teach to kids in school because I ain't no fool. And then at the very end, he says he's going to be a rock and roll star. Yes, I are. Use an incorrect grammar, right, to kind of play back to that line. You can stick what we learned in school. So I thought that was really clever and really well done. Next up, we have the Jack. The lyrics of it were developed by Scott, who was inspired by a letter Malcolm Young received during a tour. The letter was from a woman in Melbourne, implied that Malcolm had given her a venereal disease, although he claims that when he got tested, he was clean. So I think that's what this song is about. So I don't know how we're going to weave that in there, but just keep that in mind. All right, I won't break down the lyrics, but I did find there that the Jack is just gonorrhea. It's just called the Jack in Australia, or it was at the time. So there's no question of what he's singing about it. He drops a lot of these entendres in there that are just funny. Now, it is definitely a different sounding song from the second it started. Bon sounds way different. It's almost a blues type song, right? So shows you the versatility early on. Now we'll finish out the traditional side one of the album with Livewire, which I read was their concert opener for years. All right, Livewire, just a lot of energy in that one, you know? It's also some sexual driven stuff. Just see Livewire, right? You better watch out, man, because this guy, He can kind of do whatever he wants. Going to set this town on fire. I'm as cool as a body on ice, hotter than the rolling dice. Send you to heaven, take you to hell. I ain't fooling, can't you tell? Right. So got some of those in there. It's just kind of AC/DC at their best, right? The long build at the start, guitar work, the drumming, Bond firing it off, man. So well done, and important to finish off what was really important back then, how you start and finish a side of an album, right? Because you want them to want to flip it over. And they're going to want to, because side 2 starts with TNT, a song I actually do know. Went to 19 in Australia. The song style is a reference, obviously, to the explosive chemical TNT. In January 2018, as part of the Triple M's Ozfest 100, the most Australian songs of all time. Remember, we talked about that with the opener. TNT was ranked number 81. Fantastic guitar work through the whole song, but there at the end, basically Bonds is telling me, I'm TNT. I'm going to take your women and don't come at me and try to fight me because I'm going to destroy you. I don't need no gun or knife because I am TNT. But by far the shortest song on here. So catchy, right? Just a quintessential AC/DC song. Next up, we have Can I Sit Next to You Girl? It was their debut single in July of 1974, went to 50 in Australia. That version had lead vocals performed by Dave Evans prior to being replaced by Bon Scott. Obviously, this is re-recorded for this album with Bon on here. But in case you're a little bit older and you remember the Australia version, yes, this was their first single ever released. All right, Can I Sit Next to You Girl? So eventually it gets to AC/DC type music, but it starts out almost like a 1950s rock and roller, right? And I mean, the lyrics are simple. He sees this girl while they're waiting in line to go see a movie. He gives her a line, can I sit next to you, girl? And then later on, he's surprised when a guy comes up and stands next to her, but he gives the guy a line and asks her, can I sit next to you, girl? And then we go into the full-fledged, obviously Angus's guitar work on here is fantastic, but on both effects, right? So a little bit different than a normal AC/DC song at the start, at least, so I enjoyed that. All right, we got 3 songs left. Next up, we got Little Lover. It's one of the 2 that was originally on their first album, High Voltage. It's been a song Malcolm has been tinkering with since he was about 14, he said, and he originally titled it Front Row Fantasies. He claims to have written the song about Angus. All right, Little Lover definitely sounds different, but it would have if it was their first hit, even though I know Bon re-recorded, but he probably recorded it in the same style. The longer it went on, the more I appreciated the instrumentation. I'm not going to go into the lyrics. The lyrics are absolute trash. It's probably the first miss for me, but it did redeem itself a little bit as it went on. Next up, we got 2 songs left. The other song that's originally on that first album, High Voltage, She's Got Balls. A famous quote states that this was Bon's song for Irene, his ex-wife. But as the story goes, she left him after he wrote that song for her. And I mean, I read that in several places. She said, you should write a song for me. So he wrote this one. So we'll check this thing out and see why she left him. All right, She's Got Balls. I'm 0 for 2 on the High Voltage, right? Both songs on here were kind of misses for me. It's fine. Once again, I'm a broken record. The guitar work is the highlight, but I wasn't feeling that one too much. I mean, I didn't hate it. All right, and we'll finish this off with the title track, High Voltage. First released in Australia as a single in July of 1975, where it went to number 10. Peaked at number 48 on the UK singles chart, but all the way in 1980. I couldn't find why that was the case. And in that thing that we mentioned, the Ozfest 100 most Australian songs of all time, this one ranked number 95, so 3 of these songs are on there. Although Phil Rudd is erroneously credited with recording the song, the drums were actually recorded by session musician drummer Tony Corrente. So just a little thing there for you, but let's finish this album off. All right, High Voltage. Good way to end this thing. I mean, the subjects basically, they ask all these questions. He says, I do this all because of high voltage rock and roll. That's why I do what I do, which kind of sums up the album. So it's kind of quintessential AC/DC with Bon's vocals being great, guitar work being fantastic. So now we're going to get to my favorite track. Honorable mentions. Go with rock and roll singer and live wire. Faves are going to be TNT, and It's a Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll. Now to my overall score. I think this album shows you what they're going to grow into. I liked it. I didn't think there were a couple songs I weren't real high on, but nothing was horrible, right? Great musicianship throughout. Bond sounds fantastic. So I'm going to be at a 7.0 on this one. But don't worry, the journey's just beginning as we go through all of the Bon Scott-led AC/DC albums, courtesy of our patron Carl. Show him some love below. Let me know your favorite tracks below. And until next time, guys, I will see you.